Hello. If you enjoyed the story, leave your comment, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. I never thought I'd become one of those wives who follows her husband. But there I was, sitting in my Honda Civic at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, watching Mark walk into apartment 4B of a rundown complex I'd never seen before. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the radio. It started 3 months ago when Mark began these mysterious Tuesday outings. "Just running errands, honey," he'd say, kissing my forehead before disappearing for exactly 2 hours. Every single Tuesday. Like clockwork. At first I didn't think much of it. We'd been married for 12 years and Mark had always been predictable. He worked at the accounting firm, came home at 6:30, watched the news and fell asleep by 10. But these Tuesday disappearances, they were different. He'd shower beforehand, put on his good cologne, the one I bought him for our anniversary, and leave with this strange energy I hadn't seen in years. The suspicious part wasn't just the routine. It was how he acted afterward. Mark would come home with this glow, this lightness in his step. He'd hum while doing dishes, actually engage in conversation during dinner, and sometimes, this was the strangest part, he'd tear up during random TV commercials. Happy tears. "Are you having an affair?" I finally asked him last week, point blank over breakfast. He nearly choked on his coffee, laughing so hard that tears streamed down his face. "Sarah, an affair? Me? With my back problems and my obsession with organizing the garage? Who would want this?" He gestured to himself with such genuine bewilderment that I almost believed him. But today I decided to find out for myself. I called in sick to work, something I never do, and followed him. The apartment complex was in a part of town I rarely visited, older buildings with peeling paint and small balconies cluttered with plants and laundry. Not exactly the setting I'd imagined for a secret rendezvous. Mark had a key. He didn't knock, didn't wait, he just unlocked the door and walked in like he belonged there. That detail hit me like a punch to the stomach. Having a key meant this wasn't casual. This was established. This was serious. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, debating whether to march up there and confront whatever was happening. Part of me wanted to storm that door and catch him red-handed. But another part, the part that remembered how happy he'd seemed lately, was terrified of what I might find. The rational side of my brain tried to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe he was helping an elderly relative I didn't know about. Maybe he was volunteering somewhere and felt embarrassed to tell me. Maybe he was planning some elaborate surprise for our anniversary next month. But none of these explanations felt right. They didn't explain the cologne, the shower, the key, or that strange glow he'd been carrying. As I sat there, I noticed other details about the building. It was quiet, almost eerily so for a Tuesday afternoon. Most of the windows had curtains drawn. There was a small garden in the courtyard that looked well maintained, with roses and herbs growing in neat rows. It felt like a place where people minded their own business, where secrets could be kept easily. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Lunch tomorrow?" I stared at the message, realizing I hadn't told anyone about my suspicions. How do you tell people that your husband of 12 years might be living a double life? How do you admit that you don't really know the person you share a bed with every night? The waiting was torture. Every minute felt like an hour. I kept checking the time, watching the door of apartment 4B, wondering what was happening behind it. Was he with another woman? Was she younger, prettier, more exciting than me? Did she make him laugh the way I used to? Did she understand parts of him that I'd somehow missed? I couldn't stop myself from coming back. The following Tuesday I was there again, parked in the same spot, watching Mark disappear into that same apartment. This time I came prepared with snacks and a thermos of coffee, like some kind of suburban private investigator. But this week I noticed something I'd missed before. Mark wasn't alone in his routine. At exactly 2:15 p.m., an elderly woman with a walker slowly made her way to apartment 4C, right next door. At 2:30, a middle-aged man in a wheelchair arrived, helped by what looked like a caregiver. By 3 p.m., there were 5 different people who had entered various apartments on that floor. This wasn't adding up to an affair. Affairs don't run on such precise schedules, and they certainly don't involve elderly people and wheelchairs. My detective instincts kicked in and I decided to do some investigating. I spent the rest of the week researching the building online. The address led me to a property management company, but their website was vague. Residential community services, it said. Specialized care and support. Could have meant anything, assisted living, therapy services, or something else entirely. The next Tuesday, I arrived early and positioned myself where I could see more of the building. What I discovered made my heart race for entirely different reasons. This wasn't just Mark's secret. This was bigger. I watched as a young woman, probably in her 20s, walked slowly toward the building. She moved carefully, deliberately, like someone relearning how to use their legs. Behind her, a man about my age carried what looked like art supplies. Then came a teenager with his mother, the kid wearing headphones and stimming with his hands in a way that reminded me of my nephew with autism. The pieces started forming a picture, but it was nothing like what I'd imagined. This wasn't a den of infidelity. This was something else entirely. Something that explained Mark's transformation but raised even more questions. I thought about confronting him that evening, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way he hummed while making dinner, or how he'd started leaving little notes in my lunch again. Something he hadn't done since our first year of marriage. Whatever was happening on Tuesdays was changing him, and honestly I liked the changes. But I needed to know. The not knowing was eating me alive. That night I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I went through Mark's things. I felt terrible about it, but desperation makes you do things you never thought you would. In his desk drawer, underneath old tax returns, I found a folder I'd never seen before. Inside were certificates. CPR certification. First aid training. Something called peer support specialist training. And at the bottom, a letter on official letterhead from something called Second Chances Community Center. Dear Mark, it read, thank you for your interest in our Tuesday support group program. Your background in accounting and your personal experience make you an ideal candidate for our peer mentorship program. We're excited to have you join our team of volunteers who help individuals transitioning back into independent living after major life changes. Personal experience? What personal experience? I'd been married to this man for 12 years. What major life change had he gone through that I didn't know about? I kept reading. The letter mentioned your own journey with depression and recovery, and your understanding of what it means to rebuild your life after hitting rock bottom. It was signed by Dr. Jennifer Martinez, Program Director. I sat in Mark's office chair holding this letter, feeling like I was reading about a stranger. Mark had struggled with depression? How had I missed something so significant? We'd been together through everything: his father's death, job stress, my mother's cancer scare. When had he hit rock bottom, and how had I not noticed? The guilt hit me like a wave. What kind of wife doesn't know her husband struggled with depression? What kind of partner misses their spouse hitting rock bottom? I started questioning everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about Mark, about myself. But there was something else in that letter that caught my attention. It mentioned that volunteers were asked to commit to at least 6 months of consistent Tuesday sessions to build trust and rapport with participants. 6 months. Mark had been doing this for 3 months, which meant he'd made this commitment around the time I started noticing his Tuesday disappearances. I couldn't pretend anymore. That Thursday evening, as Mark was organizing his sock drawer, a habit that usually annoyed me but now seemed endearing, I decided it was time for the truth. Mark, we need to talk. He looked up from his perfectly arranged socks, and I saw something flicker across his face. Fear? Relief? I couldn't tell. About what, honey? About Tuesdays. About apartment 4B. About the Second Chances Community Center. The color drained from his face. He sat down heavily on our bed, his hands shaking slightly as he ran them through his hair. For a long moment we just stared at each other. How long have you known? He asked quietly. I followed you. Twice. And I found the letter in your desk. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have gone through your things, but Mark, I was terrified you were having an affair. He looked at me with such surprise that he almost smiled. An affair? Sarah, I can barely handle being married to one person, let alone trying to manage 2 relationships. Then what is it? What's this about depression and recovery and hitting rock bottom? When did any of that happen? How did I miss my own husband going through something so serious? Mark was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Do you remember 3 years ago when I was working those crazy hours during tax season? When I was staying late every night and coming home exhausted? I nodded. It had been a rough few months. Mark had been distant, irritable, sleeping poorly. I wasn't just working late, Sarah. I was falling apart. The pressure, the deadlines, the clients, It all became too much. I started having panic attacks at work. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I felt like I was drowning and I didn't know how to tell you because you seemed so happy, so stable. I didn't want to burden you with my problems. My heart broke a little. Mark, you're my husband. Your problems are my problems. That's what marriage means. I know that now. But at the time I felt like such a failure. Like I was supposed to be the provider, the stable one, and instead I was this anxious mess who couldn't handle his job. So I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Martinez. I told you I was working late, but really I was in therapy sessions trying to figure out how to function again. I thought back to that time period. I remembered Mark being tired and stressed, but I'd attributed it to work. I tried to be supportive by giving him space, taking care of more household tasks, not adding to his stress. I'd thought I was being a good wife, but now I realized I'd been so focused on not bothering him that I'd missed the signs that he was struggling. The therapy helped, he continued. A lot. But Dr. Martinez suggested that once I was in a better place, I might want to consider giving back. She said that people who've been through their own struggles often make the best peer counselors because they understand what it feels like to need help. So the Tuesday meetings are support groups for people who are rebuilding their lives after major changes. Some are recovering from addiction. Others are dealing with job loss, divorce, health issues, mental health struggles. I help facilitate discussions and provide peer support. I share my own experience when it's helpful and mostly I just listen. I felt a mixture of pride and shame. Pride that my husband was using his own difficult experience to help others. And shame that I'd been so oblivious to his struggle and so quick to assume the worst about his mysterious behavior. Why didn't you tell me? Why keep it secret? Mark looked down at his hands. At first I wasn't sure if I'd be good at it. I didn't want to make a big deal about it in case it didn't work out. And I don't know. It became this thing that was just mine, you know? For 12 years we've shared everything. This felt like something I needed to do on my own, to prove to myself that I could help others the way Dr. Martinez helped me. And the cologne? The showers beforehand. For the first time since we'd started talking, Mark smiled. Those people are going through some of the hardest times of their lives. I wanted to show them respect by putting in effort, by showing up as the best version of myself. It seemed like the least I could do. The next Tuesday, Mark asked me something that completely caught me off guard. Would you like to come with me today? To the center. I was getting ready for work, rushing around the kitchen trying to find my car keys when he said it. I stopped mid-search and stared at him. You want me to come to your support group? Not to the group itself. That's confidential. But Dr. Martinez mentioned they're always looking for volunteers to help with other activities. Art therapy, computer classes, job interview prep. I thought, maybe you'd be interested in seeing what I do there. The drive to the community center was surreal. For 3 months, I'd imagined this journey leading to heartbreak and betrayal. Instead, I was nervous about meeting the people who had unknowingly transformed my husband into a happier, more engaged version of himself. The building looked different in daylight when you weren't conducting surveillance from a car. It was older but well-maintained, with colorful murals on the exterior walls and a small garden that I'd now realized was probably tended by the residents and participants. Dr. Martinez was a warm woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Mark has told me so much about you, Sarah. He's one of our most dedicated volunteers. The participants really respond to his authenticity and his willingness to share his own experiences. She gave me a tour of the facility while Mark set up for his group. There was a computer lab where people could work on resumes and job applications. An art therapy room filled with paintings and sculptures created by participants. A kitchen where cooking classes taught both nutrition and life skills. A small library with books on everything from addiction recovery to career development. We serve about 50 people regularly, Dr. Martinez explained. Some live in the apartments upstairs and are transitioning to independent living. Others come for day programs while living elsewhere. Mark works primarily with our Tuesday group, people who are dealing with anxiety, depression, and major life transitions. As she spoke, I began to understand why Mark had been so transformed by this work. He'd found purpose beyond his accounting job. He'd discovered that his own struggle, which he'd seen as a weakness, was actually a strength that could help others. Can I ask you something? I said to Dr. Martinez as we walked back toward the group rooms. Mark mentioned that he went through a difficult time a few years ago, but I I feel terrible that I didn't realize how serious it was. What kind of wife doesn't notice her husband struggling with depression? Dr. Martinez stopped walking and turned to face me. Sarah, one of the most common things I hear from family members is exactly what you just said. Depression and anxiety are often invisible illnesses. People who are struggling frequently become very good at hiding it, especially from the people they love most. They don't want to be a burden. They don't want to worry anyone. Mark's ability to mask his struggle doesn't reflect poorly on you. It reflects his desire to protect you. Her words were comforting, but I still felt like I'd failed him somehow. The fact that you're here today wanting to understand and support what he's doing tells me everything I need to know about what kind of wife you are, she continued. Mark is lucky to have someone who cares enough to follow him to mysterious apartments because she was worried about their marriage. We both laughed at that, and I felt some of the guilt I'd been carrying start to lift. When Mark's group session ended, I watched the participants file out. There was the young woman I'd seen before, walking more confidently now. The man with the wheelchair laughing at something someone had said. A woman about my age who looked tired but determined. They all stopped to say goodbye to Mark, and I could see the genuine affection and respect they had for him. How was it today? I asked him as we walked to our cars. Good. Really good. Janet got a job interview for next week. David's been clean for 60 days. Maria's daughter is coming to visit next month for the first time in 2 years. He paused. It's amazing how much hope people can find when they have someone who believes in them. Is that what Dr. Martinez did for you? Believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself. Mark nodded. She helped me see that struggling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And sometimes, being human is exactly what other people need to see. 6 months later, I had my own key to apartment 4B. But it wasn't what you think. The apartment had been converted into additional meeting space for the community center, and I'd become a regular volunteer, helping with their job readiness program. Turns out, my experience in HR was exactly what they needed to help participants prepare for interviews and navigate workplace challenges. Mark and I now drove to the center together every Tuesday. What had started as his secret had become our shared mission. But that's not the unexpected part of this story. The unexpected part came 3 weeks ago, during what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday session. I was in the computer lab helping Janet update her resume when I heard raised voices from the main meeting room. This was unusual. The center was typically a calm, supportive environment. I walked over to see what was happening and found Mark standing face to face with a man I'd never seen before. You have no right to be here, the stranger was saying, his voice shaking with anger. After what you did, you have no right to pretend you're some kind of hero. Mark had gone completely pale. David, please. Not here. These people don't need to hear this. These people deserve to know who you really are. The man, David, shot back. They deserve to know that their precious peer counselor is the reason I lost everything. Dr. Martinez appeared and quickly ushered David into her office, but the damage was done. The other participants were staring at Mark with confusion and concern. I could see him struggling to maintain his composure. Mark, I said quietly, what's going on? He looked at me with eyes full of pain and shame. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. That evening Mark told me the truth. The whole truth. 3 years ago during his breakdown, Mark had made a mistake at work. A big one. He'd been so overwhelmed and anxious that he'd miscalculated a major client's taxes, costing them thousands of dollars in penalties and interest. The client was David Morrison, a small business owner who was already struggling financially. The mistake had been devastating for David. He'd lost his business, his house, and eventually his family. His wife had left him, taking their kids. He'd fallen into depression and addiction, losing everything he'd worked for. Mark had tried to make it right. He'd paid the penalties out of his own pocket, worked with lawyers to fix the filing, even offered to cover David's business losses. But the damage was done. David's life had been destroyed by Mark's error. That's when I started therapy, Mark explained, tears streaming down his face. Not just because of work stress, but because of the guilt. Because I'd ruined someone's life through my carelessness. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I couldn't undo what happened, but I could try to prevent it from happening to others. That's why I started volunteering here. It was my way of trying to atone. Does Dr. Martinez know about David? I asked. She knows everything. She's been helping me work through the guilt for years. But David found out I was volunteering here and came to confront me. He's been struggling with addiction and homelessness since everything fell apart. He thinks I'm a hypocrite for trying to help others when I destroyed his life. The next day I did something that surprised even myself. I went to see David Morrison. I found him at a homeless shelter downtown. He was thin, weathered, but his eyes were clear. He'd been sober for 2 weeks, he told me. When I introduced myself as Mark's wife, he initially refused to talk to me. "Your husband destroyed my life," he said simply. "I know," I replied. "And I'm not here to defend what he did or ask you to forgive him. I'm here because I think you should know something about what he's been doing since then." I told David about Mark's transformation, about his work at the center, about the people he'd helped. I showed him pictures on my phone of Janet at her new job, of Maria reuniting with her daughter, of the dozen other people whose lives had been touched by Mark's support. "He's not trying to be a hero," I said. "He's trying to live with what he did to you. And maybe, in some small way, he's trying to honor the person you were before everything fell apart." David listened without speaking. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I used to help people too," he said finally. "Before everything went wrong, I employed 12 people at my business. I coached Little League. I volunteered at the food bank." He paused. "I forgot that person existed." "He's still there," I said. "That person is still inside you." 3 weeks later, David Morrison walked into apartment 4B for his first support group meeting. Not to confront Mark, but to join him. The unexpected truth wasn't that my husband was having an affair, or even that he was secretly helping people. The unexpected truth was that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who can help us heal. And sometimes, the people we've hurt are the ones who can help us forgive ourselves. Mark and David will probably never be friends. But they're both in recovery now. Mark from his guilt and anxiety, David from his addiction and despair. And every Tuesday in apartment 4B, they sit in the same circle, sharing their stories with others who understand that rock bottom can be the foundation for rebuilding your life. As for me, I learned that 12 years of marriage doesn't mean you know everything about your spouse. But it does mean you have 12 years of love to build on when you discover there's still more to learn. And sometimes, the secrets that scare us the most are the ones that end up making us proud.